for joining us and sharing that insight. Now we move on to our next news. With the war in the Middle East now heading towards a concrete solution, the focus is now on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has touted his capital city Budapest as a possible venue for the next round of face-to-face talks between President Vladimir Putin and American President Donald Trump. With this, a gamut of speculation has again erupted, as Hungary is a signatory party to the Rome Statute and is bound by its membership to arrest Russian President Vladimir Putin when he steps onto their soil, owing to an outstanding warrant issued by the International Criminal Court. The European Union has placed its support firmly behind this meeting, with German government spokesperson even calling for an exception to the statute to facilitate these talks. Here's what EU spokesperson Olof Gil has said about this possibility of Putin-Trump summit.
The European Commission point of view and from President von der Leyen's point of view. First, to repeat that any meeting that moves forward the process of achieving a just and lasting peace for Ukraine is welcome. You've heard us say from here many times that it is long overdue for Russia to stop its senseless and illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. From the EU side, we are taking every possible action to support Ukraine, as well as weaken Russia's ability to wage its war.
Here's what German government spokesperson had said about what the call between President Trump and Putin says about the Russian president.
Dringend der Druck auf Wladimir Putin für ernsthafte Friedensgespräche zur Verfügung zu stehen erhöht werden. Er reagiert auf Druck, das hat die Vergangenheit auch gezeigt. Das hat vielleicht auch dieses Telefonat, was gestern geführt wurde, gezeigt, dass er auch eine Folge ist von Entscheidungen, die oder Ankündigungen der US-Seite. Und insofern ist unser voller Fokus darauf gerichtet, diesen brutalen Krieg, und das will ich vielleicht auch noch mal sagen, der im Anbetracht der Weltlage manchmal ja auch fast ein wenig in Vergessenheit gerät. Jeden Tag werden dort Menschen in der Ukraine getötet, ja, werden Städte mit Angriffen überzogen. Es ist ein brutaler Angriffskrieg, der dringend zu einem Ende geführt werden muss, dringend.
For this discussion, we welcome Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mark, for joining us again. Good to see you. Mark, this news took me by surprise because I was thinking that they might go back to Turkey for upcoming discussion. But how surprised were you about Budapest hosting a Putin-Trump summit, given that Hungary's legal obligations under the Rome Statute, as well as the ICC arrest warrant against Putin? And what do you think? What does this suggest about EU support for this meeting about its current strategy and priorities?
Sure, good to be with you. I think we have to throw in the history of Hungary. We have to then talk about Viktor Orbán, the president, leader of Hungary, with his background, which is very interesting, and once being arrested by communist authorities. He is also leading Hungary because he believes in freedom, even though he has a very strained relationship with the EU, because Hungary spend millions of dollars a day paying in fines because they have a very tight immigration policy into Hungary. And saying that, Hungary is also buying its energy, its oil, from Russia. It has a relationship there, which I believe is why it's also stepping forward to say, look, we can facilitate this in regard to the ICC, in regard to The Hague, that legality, if we just push that aside before everyone goes, but this is very important. What is important is having a discussion to work hard to end this war. And Viktor Orbán is bridges a relationship with Russia and also with the European Union. So I can see why they've stepped forward, and in many ways I think I give all credit to Hungary for in fact doing so. If you look at the past speeches within the EU, you look at the discipline that the EU has then come against Hungary. Hungary as a country, it's landlocked. is dependent on countries around it. It is keen to be trading, and it believes in getting on well with the countries around it, and particularly with Russia, because of course history plays a part, which is history they don't want to repeat. Hence why they want to see this war end with the invasion by Russia in February 2022 into Ukraine. Asuma.
Mark, thank you very much for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, the European Union is urging dialogue to restore democratic values in Madagascar following a military power grab. The EU is closely monitoring the situation and has called for all parties to engage in talks aimed at returning the country to democratic governance. European Commission spokesperson Anwar El Anouni has emphasized that the importance of dialogue during a press conference in Brussels on Friday. Let's listen into what he has said.
Quand il s'agit des événements à Madagascar, nous suivons de près ces événements en cours dans le pays. Nous appelons à un dialogue entre toutes les parties prenantes en vue de renouer avec les valeurs démocratiques.
Now, for this discussion, we're joined by Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator, joins us live from London. Thank you, Mark, for staying with us. Now, it's very interesting to see European countries coming together and commenting on the situation in Madagascar. Can you shed light on what's the connection between Madagascar and EU, particularly with France?
Well, because up until 1960, when Madagascar got its independence, because it was part of French territory, it's the French Empire in that sense. That's why there is that relationship with France. And again, I've been saying on the channel earlier in the last couple of days when we've been addressing this subject, again, we have to look at the history of Madagascar in regard to democracy, look at it around about 1972 when it's deciding to go towards the Soviet Union construct. We look at what the Soviet Union, then communism, has been up to in that part of Africa for a long time, which is a subject for another day. But that's why the history, Asuma, is there. And I would also say I think the EU needs to look at what has been happening in Nepal, what has been happening in Sri Lanka, and if they're also that worried, then maybe look at what is breaking out in Peru at the moment as well. And if we go back to Madagascar, remember that it's been said that it's the Gen Z generation that have risen up and have got fed up with the fact that they're concerned about the lack of electricity, water, and they're not opportunities for the island there of Madagascar, which is off the coast of Mozambique. So again, we have to look back. Why have we arrived at this point? It was a French protectorate, it was part of the French Empire up until 1960. Asuma.
And what do you think now that our army or military chief has taken over? What do you think will be the challenges that Madagascar will face to become a democratic governance, a peaceful country?
Well, as your colleague Pierre we were talking about yesterday or the day before, where it's this whole thing that when countries have coups, it doesn't it doesn't look good for a long period of time. It takes time to settle down because you have then overthrown this with violence. So I think really we're just going to have to sit back. Time will tell. But also, that's why the EU leaders are saying the comments that they're saying, and we can have a long discussion about democracy and what they actually believe in. But that's another thing, especially with the way they conduct themselves in the European Union. But time will tell. But the last thing we want is the continuation of violence. We want Madagascar, like many countries that are in this position, to do well. But when you've seen this, when this particular, the army then switched from one side of backing the Prime Minister to another, we have to ask ourselves, what is in it for them? What do they want out of this themselves? And very often that may not seem to be good, because once they've grabbed power, will they then hand it back to the people and have a democratic vote, which is then overseen and is a proper democratic vote, to then be able to move forward, to then put the power back into the hands of the people. As I say, time will tell, but it also takes great courage to then work through the present situation that they are in. Asuma.
Thank you very much, Mark, for sharing that insight as a geopolitical commentator. Now we move on to our next news. A Polish court has refused to